One name paralyzed the jungles of Vietnam: Master Sergeant Jerry Shriver. They called him Mad Dog. The archival footage shows a wiry man, calm, clutching a sawed-off weapon. He was a quiet, calculating force. Shriver led the most dangerous missions deep behind enemy lines, into zones where regular troops refused to go. Why was he so feared? The enemy believed he was a spirit. He moved through the dense undergrowth without breaking a twig. He vanished into the shadows before a shot was fired. At first glance, a target, but in reality, a ghost. By 1969, Jerry's legend hit its peak. But the war does not respect legends. Events accelerated. He embarked on one final mission. The fighting was intense. Then, the radio fell silent. Shriver did not return to base. He simply disappeared. He was never seen again. September 24th, 1941. That was the date on the birth certificate. The place was Defuniak Springs, Florida. It was a small town, the kind of place where paved roads turned to dirt and the heat hung heavy over the swamps. Everyone knew everyone. Secrets were impossible to keep. The Shriver family did not have money. There were no new cars in the driveway, no surplus of food on the table. But young Jerry Michael Shriver did not seem to care about poverty. Why did he stand out from the other children? Most kids were loud, running through the streets to burn off energy. But Jerry was different. He was silence personified. He preferred the company of books to the noise of people. He spent hours in the woods. He moved through the trees without breaking a single twig. He studied the insects and the leaves. His eyes held a calm, serious look. It was a gaze far too old for his age. Perhaps it was the influence of his father. The man was a veteran of the Second World War. The discipline of the barracks lived inside the Shriver home. Jerry carried that military spirit early on. As a teenager, he avoided the parties. He ignored the high school popularity contests. While others chased attention and girls, he chased purpose. He graduated high school and attempted college. It lasted only a short time. The classrooms felt like cages. He needed something real, something that would push him to the breaking point. He walked into the recruitment office. He signed the papers. The United States Army became his new reality. From the very first day of basic training, his focus was absolute. Other recruits complained about the mud. They tried to dodge the heavy lifting or hide from the drill sergeants. Jerry did not speak. He polished his boots until they mirrored his face. He ran until his lungs burned. He didn't complain. He just worked. At first glance, just another private in a green uniform. But in reality, a machine built for war. But regular service was not enough. He volunteered for the Special Forces, the Green Berets. These were not standard soldiers. They were ghosts. They operated where the regular army could not go. The selection process was designed to break men. It crushed the weak and sent them home. The archival footage shows men carrying heavy logs through swamps, faces covered in black mud, muscles trembling from exhaustion. Jerry didn't just survive the training, he dominated it. He learned to disappear into the jungle canopy. He mastered foreign languages to communicate with indigenous tribes. He became an expert in destruction, rifles, mortars, plastic explosives, hand-to-hand combat. He turned his body into a lethal instrument. The boy from Florida was gone. The soldier remained. 1966. By this date, Jerry Shriver stood on the front lines of the most brutal conflict in American history: Vietnam. It was not a war of maps or strategy tables. It was a dirty, suffocating grinder. The heat was heavy enough to crush a man. The mud swallowed boots whole. Soldiers fought two enemies, the North Vietnamese Army and the jungle itself. Why was survival so rare? There were no safe zones. The enemy did not fight in formation. The Viet Cong were ghosts. They utilized punji stakes smeared with filth. They struck from tunnel networks that stretched for miles beneath the earth. The footage shows a patrol walking in silence. Then, a sudden flash, the deafening roar of a claymore mine. One moment, total quiet. The next, total chaos. You could die without ever seeing the face of the shooter. Panic was the default state for most infantrymen, but not for Jerry. At first glance, just another grunt. But in reality, a weapon forged for this exact environment. Observers noted a strange phenomenon. Shriver looked more alive in the kill zone than he did in civilization. He did not flinch at the sound of mortars. He became calm. He became absolute. While others checked their photos of home, Jerry checked the tree line. He studied the bend of the grass. He listened for the snap of a twig or the click of a bolt. He moved through the thicket as if he were part of the vegetation. Danger did not make him nervous. It sharpened him. But this was only the beginning. His unique psychology attracted attention. The brass needed men who did not feel fear. They recruited him for MACV-SOG, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. The name sounded bureaucratic. The reality was top secret. Most Americans did not know the unit existed. Even the families of the soldiers were kept in the dark. MACV-SOG did not guard perimeters. They did not patrol secure cities. They went where the United States officially did not go. They crossed the borders. They infiltrated Laos and Cambodia. Their mission profile was insanity. Sabotage supply lines, snatch high-ranking officers, plant wiretaps on enemy communication lines. In the frame, small teams of 6 to 12 men. They apply black grease paint to their faces. They tape down their gear to silence every metallic rattle. The odds were mathematically impossible. A dozen men against hundreds of enemy troops. There was no room for a single mistake. If a team was compromised, the extraction choppers often could not land. There was no backup. There was no rescue. Only the jungle awaited them. Zero extraction plans. That was the reality of the mission. If captured, the government would deny his existence. Most men would walk away. Jerry Shriver signed the papers again and again. Why did he return to hell? It seemed like madness, but for Jerry, it was a calling. He operated with machine-like focus. He didn't work alone. He embedded himself with the Montagnards, the tribal warriors of Vietnam's Central Highlands. They were fierce. They hated the communists, but they trusted almost no one. Regular American soldiers often treated them with disdain. Jerry was different. He ate their rice. He learned their dialect. He slept on the hard ground beside them. At first glance, a foreign advisor, but in reality, a blood brother. The tribe saw his respect. In return, they gave him absolute loyalty. Jerry led from the front. He was the first boot on the ground. He demanded nothing from his men that he wouldn't do himself. But this was only the beginning. Late 1966, a new objective appeared. The team infiltrated deep into Laos. The target was the secret supply network known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. No air support, no backup, just Jerry and his team against the North Vietnamese Army. Suddenly, the silence broke. The jungle exploded. Mortars shook the earth. Enemy fire came from all sides, a complete ambush. In this situation, soldiers panic. They freeze. Jerry charged. He ran directly into the kill zone. He sprayed fire. He threw grenades with deadly precision. He didn't care about the odds. He needed to buy seconds. Those seconds meant life for his squad. He grabbed a wounded teammate, then another. He dragged them through the mud while bullets snapped twigs around his head. Shriver took a hit. He was bleeding. He was exhausted. But he refused to drop. He hauled them to the extraction zone. He shoved them onto the helicopter. The bird lifted off. Back at the base, the scene was surreal. The footage shows a man caked in dried mud, sweat, and fresh blood. Others celebrated survival. Jerry didn't speak. He sat down. He disassembled his rifle. He cleaned the bolt. He reloaded his magazines. He was ready for the next patrol. 1966. That was the year the nickname Mad Dog truly solidified. Jerry checked his gear, taped his straps, and prepared for the next insertion. Soldiers in the barracks lowered their voices when he walked by. Stories spread rapidly through the Special Forces camps. Why did his own side fear him? He was an ally, but his intensity was unnatural, and some thought he had lost his mind. The command awarded him the Silver Star for bravery. Jerry didn't care. He threw the medal into a bag and ignored it. The photos confirm it. His uniform is plain. His face is stone. No smiles, no speeches. He barely spoke a word. 1967 arrived. The war in Vietnam accelerated. The jungles turned into meat grinders, punji pits, tripwires, ambushes. American soldiers died every day. At first glance, a nightmare. But in reality, just another day for Jerry. He went on mission after mission, 2 times a week, 3 times a week. The routine never changed. The helicopter flew deep into the red zones, the camera records, the team jumping from the skids into the tall grass. The bird departed. Silence returned. They had to move fast. If a twig snapped, hundreds of enemy soldiers would swarm them in minutes. The team planted explosives. They cut supply lines. They snatched high-ranking officers from their beds. They gathered intelligence and vanished. But the enemy was watching. The North Vietnamese Army noticed the anomaly. Reports flooded their headquarters. One man survived everything. One man escaped every trap. It defied logic. The Viet Cong stopped calling him a soldier. They called him the White Ghost. Superstition took over. Enemy troops believed he was a spirit. They whispered that he walked through machine gun fire. They said he never slept. They claimed he killed with his bare hands. The fear became a strategic problem. The enemy command placed a bounty on his head, tens of thousands of dollars. It was a fortune. Every sniper in the jungle hunted him. But no one could collect the reward. November 1967. That was the date Jerry faced the impossible. U.S. intelligence had intercepted a disturbing signal. Deep in the hostile terrain of Laos, there was a hidden prison camp. The report confirmed the worst fears of the command. American prisoners of war were being held there. They were not just imprisoned, they were locked in bamboo cages, beaten daily, and left to rot. Why did High Command hesitate to launch a raid? It seemed like a suicide pact. But the intelligence was clear. The camp was surrounded by dense jungle and protected by hundreds of North Vietnamese regulars. Most believed the location was impenetrable, but Jerry saw an opportunity. The plan was simple, brutal, and incredibly dangerous. The team would insert by helicopter. They would land nearby, cut through the jungle, neutralize the guards, and extract the targets. Speed was their only defense. Just like that, all in one night. There was no backup frequency, no second wave. If the mission failed, they were on their own. At first glance, a standard reconnaissance patrol, but in reality, a desperate bid to save dying men. Jerry took the lead position. They moved through the foliage like ghosts, reaching the camp perimeter without triggering a single alarm. The element of surprise was absolute. Then, the silence broke. Jerry signaled the attack. The team opened fire. Dozens of guards were eliminated within the first few minutes. The footage shows muzzle flashes lighting up the dark tree line, but this was only the beginning. While his men laid down a wall of suppression fire, Jerry sprinted toward the cages. He didn't wait for tools. He smashed the bamboo locks with his bare hands and the butt of his rifle. He pulled the prisoners out into the dirt. The men were in horrific condition, starving, weak, barely able to stand. The team had to carry the rescued soldiers on their backs. They fought their way back to the landing zone inch by inch. The enemy returned fire blindly into the dark. Suddenly, a bullet struck Jerry in the leg. The impact almost knocked him down. Blood soaked his trousers. But pain was irrelevant. He refused to stop. He checked every cage. He ensured no man was left behind in the mud. He limped to the perimeter, covering the retreat until every single prisoner was loaded onto the birds. The rotors screamed, lifting the team out of the kill zone. The count came in over the radio. Every POW had been rescued. Not a single man on Jerry's team was lost. It was a statistical anomaly, a perfect mission in a chaotic war. Command awarded Jerry another Silver Star for the operation, but the medal on his chest didn't matter. He had brought American soldiers home. That was the only victory that counted. The mission cemented Jerry's status as a legend, but the war was far from over. January 30th, 1968. The calendar marked the Lunar New Year. A holiday truce was expected, but silence was not part of the plan. Why were the Americans caught off guard? Intelligence promised a lull, but the enemy saw an opening. 80,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops struck simultaneously. They didn't just hit the jungles, they hit the cities, Hue, Da Nang, Even the U.S. Embassy in Saigon came under fire. This was the Tet Offensive. The footage is shaky and raw. It shows military police fighting in the streets, smoke rising from the capital, panic in the eyes of civilians. U.S. soldiers woke up to the sound of mortars. They fought in hallways and alleys. It wasn't a skirmish. It was house-to-house combat. Retaking the city of Hue took weeks of brutal grinding. Concrete turned to dust. Civilians were caught in the crossfire. The casualty count skyrocketed. At first glance, a military defeat for the North. But in reality, a psychological blow that broke American resolve. In the United States, the narrative collapsed. Generals had claimed the enemy was fading. They said victory was near. The TV screen showed a different reality. The enemy was strong. The enemy was everywhere. Trust in the government dropped like a stone. Protests erupted. But Jerry ignored the politics. He didn't care about Washington debates or news anchors. He checked his gear. He watched his sector. There was no time for opinions. There was only the mission. One objective. One suicide mission. By early 1969, the Vietnam War had dragged on for years without a clear victory. The United States military was exhausted. Morale was fracturing. But Jerry Shriver remained focused. New intelligence reports had just changed the tactical landscape. A massive North Vietnamese stronghold had been identified. It was a logistical hub used to stage attacks and move battalions. The location was critical. It was not in Vietnam. It was across the border in Cambodia. Why was this a problem? Cambodia was officially neutral territory. Crossing that line meant violating international borders with zero official support. Destroying this base would cripple the enemy's supply lines, but getting there required infiltrating deep behind enemy lines. It meant bypassing hundreds of hostile troops without backup. Jerry understood the stakes. He didn't wait for orders. He volunteered. He selected his unit personally. 12 men total. A handful of American Special Forces and a squad of elite Montagnard fighters. They were battle-hardened. They had bled with Jerry before. April 24, 1969. The rotors spun up. The team loaded their gear and boarded the helicopters at a forward base in South Vietnam. The plan was simple but deadly. Infiltrate the Cambodian jungle, locate the command center, call in airstrikes to turn it into ash. The helicopters touched down deep in the enemy zone. The team disembarked and vanished into the green. They moved inches at a time. Every snapped twig could be fatal. They stayed low. They stayed quiet. But there was no mistake. The enemy knew they were coming. At first glance, the landing zone seemed secure. But in reality, they had walked into a kill box. Whether spotted from the air or tracked by patrols, the North Vietnamese Army was ready. Minutes after landing, the jungle exploded. Gunfire erupted from every direction, to the north, south, east, and west. Radio transmissions later estimated the opposition force at several hundred soldiers. The 12 men were outnumbered 20-1. The audio recording captures the chaos, the deafening roar of automatic weapons, and men shouting coordinates. The American team dove behind rotting logs and thick roots. They returned fire, but the volume of incoming lead was overwhelming. Jerry did not cower. Witnesses saw him sprinting through the kill zone. He checked his men. He shouted firing orders. He grabbed wounded soldiers and dragged them to cover. He refused to hide, but the situation deteriorated rapidly. Then, silence. Radio contact cut out. The command center called for a status report. Static. They called again. Nothing. The generals made a desperate decision. Air support was scrambled. American bombers roared over the coordinates. They dropped napalm and heavy high-explosive ordnance directly onto the team's last known position. The goal was to fracture the North Vietnamese lines and create an escape corridor. In the footage, massive fireballs consumed the canopy, turning the jungle into an inferno. Smoke choked the valley. The fires burned for hours. When the heat finally subsided, search and rescue teams inserted into the area. They swept the entire region. They looked for blood trails. They looked for spent brass casings, shredded uniforms, or broken radios. They needed proof of life or proof of death. They found nothing. There were no bodies. There was no equipment. It was as if the battle had never happened. The team simply ceased to exist. Missing in action. The Army stamped the file, but certainty was lost in the jungle. No one saw him die. No one found a body. Some argued he fell in the initial firefight, cut down by machine gun fire. Others believed the North Vietnamese dragged him across the border alive. Years passed. The rumors did not stop. Escaped prisoners brought back disturbing reports from Laos and Cambodia. They spoke of a pale American held in secret camps. The descriptions were vivid. Witnesses described a man with long, matted hair. A thick beard covered his face. Chains rattled around his ankles. Was it Shriver? There was no hard proof. But the stories persisted. 1974, 5 years after the mission, the military officially declared Jerry Michael Shriver dead. At first glance, a final verdict. But in reality, a bureaucratic necessity. Search teams never found a bone or a dog tag. To this day, the earth has not given him back. Some claim he died in captivity, waiting for a rescue. Others say he lies where he fell. It remains a dark mystery. But the service record is clear. Jerry completed over 100 combat missions. He earned 3 silver stars, a bronze star with a V device, a Purple Heart. But medals were not his legacy. He kept fighting when others quit. He never wrote a book. He never gave an interview. He did not come home. But among the toughest operators of the war, his name still demands respect. The soldier became a myth,